Okay, so let's begin. We are holding Daf Mem Ches Amud Sheni, and we're going to start from 2 lines from the top. From Be'ez Hashem, we're going to start from Boya Rav Sheshes. Okay, it's a nice, easy, simple Daf going forward. So Boya Minei Rav Sheshes. They asked the question from Rav Sheshes. Hoylocha bismoil mahu. If someone carries, all the avodas in the base of Mikdash have to be done with your right hand. Now, so after you slaughter the blood, let's just wait for Sheldon. Hi, Sheldon.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Okay, we're just starting.
Okay.
We're starting from Memches Amud Sheni, 2 lines from the top. Boy, my name is Rav Sheshes. They asked the question from Rav Sheshes. Haylacha b'small mahu. If you carried the blood with your left hand, what would be the din? In other words, like this: when after they slaughter a korban, they would have the blood be caught in a vessel, right? And then from that had to be done by a kohen. Then you would take that blood, carry it a distance of, let's say, 75 feet to the mizbeach, and then the kohen, or maybe the same kohen or another kohen, would spray the blood on the mizbeach. Okay, but all the avodas on the service that you do in the base of Mikdash has to be done with your right hand, and that we learned out from Mitzorah. There's an extra pasuk by Mitzorah that says the right hand has more importance than the left hand.
Even if he's a lefty.
So even if you're a lefty, the right hand has a cheshivas for the Beis Hamikdash stuff. So the question was, since haylacha, carrying the blood after it was slaughtered, that it was caught in a vessel, carrying it from the place where you slaughtered, the 75 feet to where the mizbeach was, supposedly, if you did that service, even though that service is supposed to be done with a kohen, that service is not really explicitly in the Chumash. The Chumash, it's understood, self-evident, that you have to carry the blood from the place that you're slaughtering it, which is on the north side of the Beis Hamikdash, towards the south side. But the Torah doesn't explicitly say carry the blood. So if you carried it in your left hand, mahu, what would be the din? Amalahu Rav Sheshes said, Tanisuhu, didn't we learn this in our Mishnah? Notal as hamachata biminoi. So let's take a look at the picture. Here's the Kohen Gadol on his way to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Notice the coals, which is the unimportant part, is in his right hand, and the ketoris, which he's going to pour on the coals, is in his left hand. So you see that you could carry things in your left hand, and it's not a problem. So therefore, carrying it is not as chashuv, is not as strict, as important as the other services, and we see that it can be done b'di'evet with your left hand.
But he's going to pour it, though. He's going to pour the ketoris on the coals, pouring it with his left hand.
So we're going to see. No, he's going to pour it with his hand. That's this. That's this discussion of today's daf. So we'll see more about that in a few minutes. So where did he learn it from? He learned it from another Mishnah, Masechta Yoma. So the Gemara asks, "V'nifshat luhu ma'adetanan." Rav Sheshes could have answered this question from another Mishnah that we had. It's another Mishnah, Masechta Tamid, which says that when you brought the limbs of the animal onto the mizbeach, the Mishnah says you carried haregel shel yamin. You carried the right foot bismol in your left hand. The Kohen carried the right foot of the animal in his left hand, and in the right hand he was carrying the head of the animal. So in the left hand he was carrying the foot of the animal, the right foot of the animal, ubeis oira lechutz, and you can see the way it was skinned on the outside. In other words, in a nice way, you can see that it looked like a neat piece of meat that you're carrying onto them. You're going to carry up to the mizbeach. So it says clearly that you're carrying something, a service of haylacha, bringing something to the mizbeach with your left hand. So the Gemara says, so why did Rav Sheshes use that Mishnah as a proof that left hand is good? So the Gemara says, Ima Hasam, if I would have learned it only from over there, Havamina, I would have thought, Hanamili, that's only when does the left hand not a problem? is halacha d'loy ma'akve kapara. When bringing it does not hold back the kapara. Because what kind of service are you doing over here in that Mishnah? You're bringing the limbs of the animal onto the mizbeach. Well, that's not as important, because once you do the spraying of the blood of the carbon on the mizbeach, so right, you're supposed to burn the animal on the mizbeach, but if you didn't, you still get a kapara. So it doesn't hold back the kapara by not bringing it onto the mizbeach. So therefore, left hand is good. Avo haylacha dem akva kapara, but haylacha carrying something, carrying the blood after you slaughter the animal to the mizbeach, where that's an important type of carrying that would hold back. If you don't do that service, the whole kapara will be held back. The whole forgiveness, the whole carbon would be worthless. So maybe in that case, I might think that left hand is no good. Loy, I might think it would work. Kamash Malan from our Mishnah, where you're actually bringing the ketores, which is the most important service, in your left hand. That was the service that did a kapara. As we learned, ketores was a kapara. So that was very important. So that was a better proof from our Mishnah that left hand is okay from our Mishnah, which describes the carrying of the ketores into the Kodesh Kodashim. Now we go to Mem Tes Omar Aleph. So Meisaveh. So the Gemara asks a question. Here's a brisa that says Zar. Zar is a non-Kohen. Okay? If he does this service, as non-Kohen does or an Oinen, let's say a Kohen who's supposed to sit Shiva, his family member just died, so he's an Oinen. Or if a Kohen was a Shikor, he was drunk. Ubalmum, or the Kohen was a handicap. So B'Kabbalah, by catching the blood, Ubahilacha, by bringing the blood, Ubezrika, or spraying the blood. If any of these services were done by these pasul kahanim or by a non-kohen, pasul, the whole carbon is pasul. Says the brisa, the chen yoshev, if the kohen is sitting while doing the service, let's say he's in a wheelchair and he brings the halacha, or bechein besmoil, the brisa says that if you do it in your left hand, pasul, it is pasul. So this is a clear brisa that says halacha done with the left hand pasuls the carbon. To Yofta, this is a refutation against Rav Sheshes, who said left hand is good. Now the Gemara asks a question, but how is it possible that Rav Sheshes did not know of this brisa? He seemed in another conversation. Rav Sheshes actually quoted this brisa. So how could Rav Sheshes make the mistake to say left hand is kosher? He must have known about this brisa. And obviously the Gemara is going to say that only after he found out about this brisa, he knew about the brisa and was able to bring it up in conversation. But this is prior to that, he had a position that left hand is good. But let's see what the Gemara says. How did Rav Sheshes ask this question? He must have known about the brisa. Rav Sheshes brought this brisa up in a different conversation. The Amalei Rav Sheshes, the Amarei Rav Chizda. Rav Sheshes said to the interpreter or the Talmud of Rav Chizda, he said, Boy menei Rav Chizda, you ask from the Rabbi Rav Chizda, Hoylocha bezohar mahu. Ask Rav Chizda, what's his opinion that Hoylocha, carrying the blood, bizarre, with a non-kohen, mahu, what would be the din? In other words, the question is, a shechita, as we learned many times, can be done by a non-kohen. Kabbalah, as we said, catching the blood after it's slaughtered right away, that can only be done by a kohen. That's a pasuk in the Chumash. But carrying the blood to the kohen who's standing by the mizbeach, can that be done by a non-kohen? And then pass it off to a kohen to do the zrika, to do the spraying. So carrying, is that kosher? Is that good? Abaleis Rav Chizda said, Sheira, it's kosher. Umikra misayeini. I have an open pasuk in Tanakh that says it's good, because the pasuk says in Divrei Hayomim, Vayishchatu ha-pasach, they slaughtered the Pesach, and then it seems that a non-kohen slaughtered the Pesach and carried the blood to the kohen. Vayizruchu ha-kayanim miyodam, and the kahanim was spraying from their hands. The Leviim mafshitim, and the Leviim would skin the animal. But it says that the kahanim accepted the blood from the non-kohen and actually sprayed it on the mizbeach. So we see from this pasuk that halacha can be done by a non-kohen. So that was Rav Chizda's interpretation. So now, so What's the proof Rav Sheshes knew about the brisa? So Rav Sheshes went ahead and asked from that brisa. Umoisav Rav Sheshes asked, Zor v'oinem v'shikar balmun b'kabbalah v'aylocha v'zricha. We have a brisa that says a zor, a non-kohen that does haylacha, he's puzzle. So you see clearly, how could you Rav Chizda say a zor doing the haylacha is kosher? This brisa says a zor doing the haylacha is puzzle. The brisa continues, small, the left hand is also puzzle. So apparently, is Rav Sheshes bringing up this brisa in another conversation? He must have known that about this brisa, and this brisa clearly says left is puzzle. So how would Rav Sheshes make a mistake and say left is kosher? Answers the Gemara simple. After he heard about this brisa and retracted what he said that left is kosher, the brisa clearly says left is puzzle. Now he held this brisa is true. He could ask it, he could bring it up in conversation and use this brisa against Rav Chizda, who said azar, haylacha is kosher, the brisa says haylacha is puzzle. So now the Gemara just finishes off the loose ends. How could Rav Chizda say, Rav Chizda had a proof that haylacha bizarre is kosher? Because the pasuk says that the zarim were carrying it and they gave it to kahanim to do the spraying. So Rav Chizda kraka amar. Rav Chizda brought a pasuk that seemed to say that haylacha is good with a zar, with a non-kohen. And for the Gemara, the avid ma'isa itztaba. In that pasuk, it wasn't that the kohanim, that the zar actually carried the blood from the beis hashchita to the kohen. This is what happened: a non-kohen shechted. Then the Kabbalah was done by a kohen. As we said, catching the blood has to be done by a kohen. That kohen actually brought it to the mizbeach and then passed it over. Listen to this. He passed it over to a Yisrael who stood there like a table, who stood there like a itztaba, like a regular table, just holding the blood. And the blood was taken by another kohen to do the sprinkling on the mizbeach. So that's how.
Then what was the purpose of the Yisrael? If they really met and he didn't even walk, why did they need him to begin with?
Who could answer that question?
The first cut.
No, who could answer the question? This is what you're going to experience in a few days, Stephen. It's what you do at a bris. You pass the baby around.
No, Shalia.
And people are just holding the baby and not doing anything. As more people are involved in the mitzvah, even though you don't really need them, that's also a covet for the mitzvah. And here's the source of kvater in the Gemara. There's no source of, I don't know, by Ashkenazim, they do a lot of passing around. Pass to this one, pass to that one, give it to this one, to that one. Where did that come from? We don't need them from this Gemara. The Gemara seemed to say that the Kohen who caught the blood after the Shkita, ran to the Mizbeach, passed it over to Yisrael, who stood there like a table, and then another Kohen took it and sprayed it. So
it's really just a kibbud.
Just a kibbud. That's right, it was. And that's what you learn from this pasuk, and here would be the source of kvater. But I want to tell you that there is an opinion that by the Svardim, by Teimanim, they do not do that. They don't mechabed anybody. One guy brings the baby in, he's the kvater, he's the one that holds the baby during the bracha and then walks out with the baby. Because their opinion is that when the Gemara says that if you're a sandik, it's a segula for being wealthy. And everybody asks the question that many times you see sandik, a guy's a sandik and he didn't become wealthy. And we learned the Gemara says that if you're a sandik, it's a segula becoming wealthy. The answer is because we're passing out the kibudim, we're breaking up the kibudim to many different people. But the real essence of the blessing is if one person can do the whole thing. So that's not so common. Anyway, Boy Rapapa. Rapapa had a question. New Gemara. Rapapa's question is like this. We learned in the Mishnah that this is the way they do it. Remember the Mishnah. Let's get the picture up. Okay. They brought down a shovel of ketoris right over here. And the Kohen would take a handful of the ketoris that was in the shovel and put it into the spoon, right? That was the spoon. And then that was the shovel a spoonful of his handful, So the Gemara's question is, what happens if this poor kohen that just did this service, getting the ketoris prepared, died? So let's see what it says. Let's read it inside. No, I'm sorry. In other words, if his friend did it and put it into his hands, it's a different question, but that's the next question. Somebody else took it out, scooped it out of the shovel and put it into his hands. In other words, the Kohen Gadol did not scoop it. Somebody else came and scooped it out of the shovel, put it into the Kohen Gadol's hands, and the Kohen Gadol put it into the spoon. Now, what would be the din? Maloi chafna be'ena. Do we need that the Kohen Gadol needs his handful? V'ha'ika, that he still has his handful. He didn't exactly take it from the shovel, but at the end of the day, who's putting it into the spoon? It's the Kohen Gadol. So that's considered his handful. Dilma, but maybe the pasuk says v'lokach v'hevi, and we'll say that the lokach means that the kohen actually has to take the ketoris from the shovel. And that's not here in this case. If someone else did it, teku. So the Gemara remains this question unresolved. Okay. Next question. Boya Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked the question. Chafan v'meis. Let's say the Kohen Gadol did the spoonful and put it into a spoon, and then the poor guy passed on. And now we have a new Kohen taking his place. Can the second Kohen that's taking his place use the spoonful of the first Kohen? So the Gemara, that's a good question, because at the end of the day, you don't want to waste it, right? So might as well the Kohen that died, the Kohen Gadol that's taking over, should use the spoon of the handful of the previous Kohen. Rab Chanina answered. Rab Chanina saw Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked this question. And the Gemara says, Boy urei she'elis rishonim. When Rab Chanina was giving a discourse in his yeshiva, he said that we're asking the same question that the Rishonim, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who was earlier my Rebbe, who asked this question. So he was telling him, his students who asked a similar question, that people before us asked this question, which was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So from this Gemara implies that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was older than Rabbi Chanina. So now the Gemara just goes off on a tangent. Remember, do you want to say to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Koshish, was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi older than Rabbi Chanina? For our Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, as you know, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi made a comment in Hilchas Shabbos. You're not allowed to take medications on Shabbos. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Li hitter Rabbi Chanina lishta shachalayim b'Shabbos. I got a heter, a permission for Rabbi Chanina to drink shachalayim, is a garden cress on Shabbos. So garden cress, first of all, is a healthy food that has medicinal benefits. So I was permitted to drink garden cress on Shabbos. So the Gemara just wants to understand what's the case. Lishtois, to drink, perhaps you squeezed it out and you made the juice from it. Pshita, the Tanan, kol oichelin, oichel adam l'refuah, v'chol mashkin shoisa. If it's an edible food and your intention is to eat it for healing purposes, you're allowed to do so. So it's nothing, no Isser on Shabbos, because it's not a medicine. This is actually a food item. So what would have been the problem? What do you need Rab Chanina to give you the leniency? Ella, the leniency was lishchoik v'lishtoi shachalayim b'Shabbos, to I guess grind and crush it to make juice out of it, this garden cress on Shabbos, and he gave me permission to do so. So the Gemara still doesn't answer. What do you need the leniency for? Hey Chadami, what's the case? If there was a sick person that's in danger of dying, Mishra Shari, then it's certainly permitted. You don't need Rab Chanina to give you the heter. But if there is no sakana nefashis over here, that no one's dying, Mesa Asir, it should be also to crush garden cress on Shabbos. So the Gemara says the case was like this: La'olam the ika sakanta. Really, there was a dangerous situation over here. But the question was, is garden cress does it have any medicinal benefits? Because if it didn't, even if there was a sakonis nefashos, you wouldn't be allowed to crush it if it didn't have any medicinal benefits. And that was the question. This was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's question to Rabbi Chanina. Mi masya, does garden cress heal you? The nechel alaho shabata, that I can be mechal Shabbos in the case of an emergency. Or loy masya, or it does it not heal? V'noy nechel alay shabbat. Shabta, and then you can't be Michal Shabbos for it, because if it doesn't heal, then you're doing an Isser. It's not saving the person's life. So the Gemara says, Maishna Rabbi Chanina. Why did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi ask Rabbi Chanina? What was so unique about Rabbi Chanina? And for the Gemara, Mishum the Baki Berfuasu. He was an expert in medicine. Maybe he was a pharmacologist, and therefore he understood medicine, and that's why they asked him this question. The Amar Rabbi Chanina said. Rabbi Chanina says in another case to show his knowledge of medicine. Nobody ever asked me a question al makas pirda, on a wound that he got pirda levana from a white mule. If a white mule bit someone, so to speak, how to heal such a person. In other words, once you get bitten by a white mule, a person dies. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? That's not the case. We see people get whacked by a white mule and they live. So Emet, what he meant to say is v'chayas, the wound that he got hit by a mule would heal. So the Gemara says that's not true. We see people who get whacked or bitten by a white mule do get healed. And for the Gemara, besumkon inu, when you have a red mule, v'chivoron reish kare, and it has white by the edges of its feet, it is white. Karminim. That mule, if you get hit by it will the wound will never heal. That's what the Gemara says. So that's the Gemara. I don't know. Mules were was a very important animal for Parnasa. So anyway, what you do see in this Gemara, why did the Gemara bring this? That Rab Chanina was a Rebbe of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked him a question in Hilchos Shabbos. So how can, in our case, Rabbi Chanina say that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was the Rebbe and he was the Rishonim? Rabbi Chanina seemed to have been the older person over here. From nevertheless, this is the question. Shmami no, the Rabbi Chanina kashish. We see Rabbi Chanina was the older person. And the Gemara Elahachi Kama. This is what he meant to say. That Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is asking the same question what I would ask. In other words, what I would ask also is the same question as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Because I'm older than Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is asking this question. So therefore, we're similar. We're asking similar questions. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi obviously is the younger of the two. So now it seemes that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Chanina, now the Gemara asks another question. So this is a question. What was the question again? The question is that if Chafan uvameis, a Kohen Gadol did a scoopful and then died, can we still use that spoonful? And do we have to make a new one? Do we have to make a new spoonful? So the Gemara says, how could Rabbi Chanina have this question? Umi Amar Rabbi Chanina Hachi. Did Rabbi Chanina have a question? The Gemara is going to prove that Rabbi Chanina always held that you cannot use the same. You cannot use the same spoon. That the new kohen has to make a new scoop. You have to throw out the old ketoras. Why? Because Rabbi Chanina said, "Bepar v'loy b'domei shel par." What's that talking about? That if the kohen shechted the par, let's say the kohen gadol, the order of the day is the kohen gadol shechs the par. Then, as you remember, let's just remind you. Let's say you remember this. Let's see. You remember the Kohen Gadol, sorry, let's just get this. The Kohen Gadol was, let me just bring this down. Yeah. If you remember, the Kohen Gadol shechted the par. And then he gave the blood over to a guy who's just mixed it. And then he prepared the ketores, like it says, like in this picture, to go into the Beis Hamikdash. Right? So first you shech the par, and then you did the ketores. The Gemara says that if, let's say, the Kohen Gadol died, do you have to bring a new par, or can you use the blood that the guy is, if the replacement comes in, can he use this blood and bring it in? So Rab Chanina said, no, the par, the lebedamishal par. We darshan that the Kohen Gadol had to be the one to shech the par. The replacement Kohen Gadol can't just start and bring in the blood of the previous Kohen par. So fine. So once you know that the Kohen has to re-shech the par, then he has to redo the scooping again, because the scooping has to be done after the shechita of the par. If you happen to scoop the kataris before shechting the cow, you didn't do anything. So if the Kohen Gadol died after scooping, you're going to have to re-shech the par. And according to Rab Chanina, you're going to have to re-scoop the kataris, because if you don't re-scoop the kataris, it turns out that kataris was scooped before the shechting of the par, and it's not good. So you're going to, according to Rab Chanina, certainly, if the Kohen Gadol died, you have to re-scoop again. So what's Rab Chanina asking this question that I have this, that Rabbi Shua Levi is asking the same question as earlier people? So the Gemara says, Hachi Kamar. This is what Rabbi Shua Levi meant to say. I certainly don't have a question. Certainly you have to re-scoop again. Since Rabbi Shua Levi had this question, Miklal, it must be the Ksavar, Rabbi Shua Levi holds, that the Kohen Gadol that died after the shechting of the cow, the second Kohen Gadol could walk in with the blood of the previous Kohen Gadol's par. He doesn't have to re-shecht the cow. So therefore, since you're not re-shechting the par, perhaps according to that, you wouldn't have to re-scoop again. And since he holds like that, he's asking the same question of those that argue on me, because my antagonists hold that not like me, and they hold you don't have to re-shech the par. So if you don't have to re-shech the par, you can ask that question: do you have to re-scoop again, or can you use the previous Kohen scoop? That was what the conversation Rab Chanina saying about Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's question. The other Gemara just analyzed it. My hava Allah, and this is Steve. This is what your question was. The question is, when the Kohen Gadol walks into the, let's see, when the Kohen Gadol walks in with the scooper over here, and when he gets to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Kodesh Kodashim, and he puts the coals down, does he have to put the ketoris back into his hands again, or can he take the spoon and simply pour it on the coals? See, we're familiar with this picture. We're familiar with the picture of this, where the Kohen Gadol takes the scoop, somehow gets the scoop back into his hands and pours it onto the coals. So does he have to do that or not? Now, I want to point out to you, it's very important that the Kohen Gadol, whatever is in the Kohen Gadol's hands, that's exactly what has to be poured onto the coals. He can't have one drop of that ketoris fall on the floor, because if one drop falls on the floor, the whole service is puzzled. And he can't bring more ketoris into the Kodesh Kodashim, because that's coming in for nothing. So this basically is, he had to be like as athletic and as with great hands as a heart surgeon, lahavdil, because you're going to see that he's going to have to do this crazy thing with his hands. We'll show you. Amar Rapapa said, what was the question all about? If you hold that the Kohen Gadol does another scoop when he gets inside the Kodesh Kodashim, then you can have a question. Then you can have the question if somebody could do the original scoop and then transfer it to his hand and transfer it into the spoon, because at the end of the day, right before he's gonna pour it onto in the Kodesh Kodashim, he's gonna again put it into his hand. So you're gonna have a chafina over there. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have it in his hands a second before he puts it onto the coals. But if you hold if you hold that the Kohen Gadol never puts it back into his hands when he gets into the Kodesh Kodashim. He just takes it from the spoon and dumps it onto the coals. So what's the question? Tibayalach. What kind of question? What kind of question could you have? You'll have this question. You could have this question. At the end of the day, it's a spoonful. It's albeit not his spoonful, but it's another kohen who has the similar handful of his hand. Or does the Torah require that it has to be this kohen's handful? It can't be his friend's handful. That's why you'll have a question. So this is the question of using another kohen to scoop it is contingent on what you hold when the kohen gadol gets into the Kodesh Kodashim. Does he have to re-scoop it into his hand or not? He said just the opposite. Adarabah. If you hold chayfin v'chayzer v'chayfin, that he scoops and re-scoops it into his hand, then we can say for certain lo yikonis acha b'chavinase. Then certainly nobody can do it with his chafina, because if you're using another kohen's to do the scoop, the original scoop, then it's impossible that the next kohen, the kohen gadol himself, should be exactly the same hands and size hands as the original, that the kohen that took the scoop. So if you're requiring the kohen to take from his hands and pour it onto the coals, he has to do the entire service. He has to do from the very first scoop to the second scoop, because you can't compare hands. But if you hold that you can't take another scoop, you'll have a question. The Gemara has the question: does the kohen re-scoop when he gets into the Beis Hamikdash? When he gets into the Kodesh Kodashim, does he take it back into his hands again? Tashma. So maybe you could prove it from our Mishnah, because the Mishnah says kach hoisamidasai. That means that you take the exact measurement. You scoop once outside, and when you get into the Kodesh Kodashim, you scoop it again from the spoon. My love, doesn't mean just like you scooped it on the outside of the Kodesh Kodashim, you re-scoop it again on the inside. So the Gemara says, "Life from our Mishnah, it's not so." Dilma, maybe Shimratzas lasas mida oisa. Maybe what our Mishnah is trying to say is you don't have to scoop it at all. You could make a vessel. You could form a vessel that has the same measurements as the handful of the kohen, and he doesn't have to scoop it at all. That's what it means, midasa. Iname, or it's the Mishnah saying shlo yechaser v'shlo yoser. The kohen has to be careful not to lose anything and not to overpile. It has to be exactly whatever he scooped out on the outside. He should bring it inside and not let anything fall on the floor. He shouldn't bring extra and shouldn't bring less. Anyway, there was an abaya, and this is very important to remember. There was a question: does the kohen, when he gets inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, does he re-pour what's in the spoon into his hand? Now here is very important. Tashma, this is one very important Gemara. Tashma, come in here. Kate said, "Hu oisa." How would the kohen gadol actually do it? So here the Brisa actually will tell you that the kohen gadol would actually bring it in. Hold on. Let's see here. Okay. 1 second. No. Pardon me for a second. Here. I want you to see this picture. This picture over here will describe what the kohen gadol is actually going to do. And once you see the picture, the Gemara goes 1, 2, 3. He actually holds the spoon. He drops the shovel on the floor. He holds the spoon with his tippy fingers, and with his thumbs, he actually moves the handle back under his arms. And then he has to tip with his thumbs into his hands. So you see, he has to be and he has to make sure not one drop of this powder falls on the floor. If it does, the whole service is puzzle. So this is the service. You get it? You push it back with your fingers with his thumbs into his arms, and then controls it and turns over the cup. So
who trains him how to do it?
That was the hardest service. That's what the Gemara is going to say.
Right, but someone had to show him.
Right.
Someone had to train him.
Right. It probably took months and months.
Wasn't this a certain family that was the whole idea that
No, the
they
certain
could only
fam-
do the Torahs?
No, the certain family knew the ingredients, how to make it. They
The
knew
ingredients, not exactly the procedure.
the procedure required a
But
dexterity
Burr,
skill.
I know it's time, but if it's puzzle, do they have to? Can he do it again?
Yeah, but he'd have to go out. But that means he came in for nothing. And
But you said that he couldn't take if it drops. He can't take more Ketoras because it's wasting.
right. If it drops, he probably had to go out of the Kodesh Kedoshim and go back outside, and maybe they made extra and to bring it in again. They'd have to redo the service again. But there would be Isser because he's in the holiest place and he had a Bia Rekonis coming in for nothing.
Right.
So he had to get it right. Otherwise,
So after he did this procedure you're showing us, and the ladle is upside down, and all the Ketoras are in his hands.
What does he do?
Now what? Because there's just no way he can open
Then
his
he does
hands.
this.
No, because look at the picture. The
The
ladle's
spoon.
gone.
Yeah. What
How does
about?
he get
What
rid
happens
of
to
the
the
ladle?
spoon?
So he drops the ladle. He just
How?
He
undoes
drops
his,
the spoon.
Go
drops
back
the
to your
spoon.
picture. How could he possibly do it?
Well, nothing stuck to the bottom of the nothing.
No, but it's up on top of all the stuff. It's
Yeah, but he's not holding it in his hand. Once he emptied this into his hands, right? Like
He lets it tip over. He lets
I
it
think
over.
he lets it fall on the floor.
He lets it tip over the other side.
Remember, if one part of this powder falls on the floor, it's over. So I guess he lets it. Yeah, right. He had to like maybe loosen his hands or something. I have no idea, but I don't
That's
think
fair.
that's
He really has to be very nimble with his fingers.
right.
Crazy.
Right. And this is after a whole night being up. So it's not simple. So that's what he said. He holds it with the tips of his fingers, the spoon part, with his teeth. I don't know if it's possible. And he brings it with his thumbs till he brings it into his under his armpits. Then he turns it into his palms again. Now, the Gemara says, the Brisa continues, and here, so it's clearly that he doesn't put the spoon onto the coals. It comes from his hands. He piles all the Ketoras, one dump on the coals. Why? So it should take a little bit of time for the smoke to come out, because if he spread it out over the coals, the smoke would come very quickly and could actually give him smoke inhalation. So he had to dump it like a real dump pile on top of the coals, so he doesn't get the sudden burst of smoke into his nose. And some say the opposite. He would spread it out so that the smoke comes very quickly. Because at the end of the day, we don't want him to be in the Kodesh Kedoshim looking around, because again, you're not allowed to stare at the place where the Shechina is. So rather have the smoke come very quickly. And then the Gemara says, this is the hardest service of the Beis Hamikdash. So clearly the Brisa says that you actually pour it into your hands. So the Gemara asks just a side question. This is the hardest service in the Beis Hamikdash. Zuhi v'sulai, there was no other service that was more difficult. Well, Ika Malika. There's the concept of Malika. Malika is this. Malika is when they didn't shecht birds in the Beis Hamikdash. When you brought a bird,
the fingernail.
Right. So actually, the holding of the bird the wings were held between your thumb and middle finger, and the legs were between your ring finger and your pinky. And then you did this, and then you had to. Apparently, if you had arthritis, for sure, this was a hard job. But the pinching to break through was very difficult. It's not easy. It looks easy in the picture, but to get your nail straight through that back of the neck was very difficult. So that was his hard service. How could you call this the hardest service? Va'ika malika, va'ika kamitza. Kamitza is getting the scoopful of a menachas. Ella, so the Gemara says, Zuhi avoida kasha may avoidus kasha b'migdash. This is one of the most difficult services of the Beis Hamikdash, but not the most difficult, or one of the harder ones. Shma mina, from here is a proof. Chayfin, you did a scoopful outside, and then you scooped it again. When you got inside the Kodesh Kedoshim. Shma mina. So actually, you didn't take from the spoon and pour it on the coals. You actually did one more scoop. Let's just do one more quick Gemara. Ibaylahu shochat v'meis. We saw this. You shechted the cow, and the kohen gadol died. Now the question is, mahu sheyikonis achar bedomei. Can the next kohen that takes over, can he just use the previous kohen's blood? Remember, the blood is there's just a guy stirring there. The blood. Can he use the blood of the kohen? Me, I'm rooting. Do you say bepar vafilu bedomei shapar? Because the Chumash says this pasuk. It has to be a cow. So does it mean that the kohen gadol had to shech the cow, or could it mean that even if the kohen gadol didn't shech the cow, the fact is that if he's coming into the kodesh kadashim with the blood of the cow, that's good enough too. So the Gemara says, "Bapar, do you learn darshan from the par? Even with the blood of the par, Dilma, Bapar, the Torah wants that the kohen gadol shech the par. He can't start the service from the blood of the cow. So Rabbi Chanina, he says you use the cow, but not the blood of the cow. He could come with the blood of the cow. He doesn't have to. The second kohen could take over just from the blood. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak So Rabbi Yitzchak Napcha, that's his name. He held that the second kohen that took over, he does not have to reshech the original cow. He could use the blood of the previous kohen par. So the Gemara asks a question, Eisvei Rab Ami Rabbi Yitzchak. Rab Ami asked the question to Rabbi Yitzchak. We learned by Psachim, Nimnin u'moishchi yedeyim mimenu achi shachem. Remember, a carbon pesach, you can reserve a carbon pesach, and you can resign from your place on this carbon pesach until they shech the carbon pesach. After they slaughtered the carbon pesach, you can't resign. It's too late. You have to be part of that group. If you say what you just said, why don't you say you could resign until they spray the blood of the carbon pesach on the mizbeach? Because you see, it's still called a cow, even though it's the blood of the cow. So call it a seh, that the carbon pesach is still alive, and that you can resign from it until you spray the carbon pesach on the mizbeach. Why does the Gemara, why does the Brisa limit you that you could only resign until the shchita, not until the zrika? So the Gemara says carbon pesach is different. Shani Hasam, it's different. The Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, b'yois miseh michiyusa b'deseh. The Torah says that you can resign from the carbon pesach only while it's a live sheep, not when it's a dead sheep. So as long as it's alive, yes, you can resign. Once you shecht it, then it's too late. You can't take yourself off the group. On the other hand is what we discussed today, that if the kohen gadol died after slaughtering the cow, it could be still called the second kohen gadol that's taking over. It could still be called his cow, and he doesn't have to reshech a new cow. Even just carrying that blood in to do the service of spraying, still it's considered the second kohen's cow, and that would be good enough. According to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, you don't have to reshech the cow; it's still good enough. So
Bernard, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
The first Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol makes the first nick, and then he has to move over to collect the blood. Is that right?
No, yes, and somebody else is with him.
So who else is with him to make the final cut, the end cut to make more
another
blood?
Another kohen.
So would that be the assistant one?
It could be assistant. It could be.
So that would make sense then, because if the assistant is making the final cut, he's actually also in the act of the cut.
No,
so that's why if that Cohen
Sheldon,
dies,
the Sheldon, he doesn't make he makes a kosher shchita. Right. So once the kohen gadol shechted most of the simanim, most of the windpipe and so it's kosher. The other kohen just finishes it because that's
okay. So he does the actual shchita. The other one is just making sure that the cut is complete.
Complete, and then you're going to separate the head because they wash the head out.
Understood. Because I would think that would make sense then. That wouldn't be like the Korban Pesach because you have two people doing a shchita.
No, it can't be that. They can't have two people doing the shchita. There has to be one person, and that's it.
Okay.
But so that's it. But again, we learned a lot of interesting things about this is the main part of the whole service. I don't think you'll find this anywhere in Masechta Yuma about this brisa, which is such an important brisa of how they actually did the Ketoris into his hand. Okay,
Yep.
Oh,
very good.
Shkoyach.
Okay, Bez Hashem, we
Thank
continue
you.
tomorrow,
Shkoyach.
8:45.
Thank you.
Okay, good enough.